Welcome to the astrology forecast for December of 2024. My colleague and friend Justin Crockett is joining me today for the December forecast. Hi Justin, how you doing?
Great, Liz. How are you doing today? I'm just excited to talk about December.
Me too. So let's get to it. You ready?
Crazy month coming.
So to get a hold of Justin, his website is justincrocketelzie.com and my website is alightpath.com. And we always enjoy hearing from you. So we're in the time of Sagittarius, a mutable, adaptable sign. It's a fire sign, assertive and energetic, and the ruling planet is Jupiter. And the keyword is I seek. And would you like to say some of the keywords, Justin, for Sagittarius?
Yeah, so some of the keywords are expansive and adventurous. Really sort of freedom seeking and independent thinking, and of philosophy. It rules philosophy, and of course the caution is arrogance or unreliability or inconsistency or impatience, and it can also be a little competitive as well.
Right, because they oftentimes are really good in sports.
Mm-hmm.
So, looking at the chart for December 1st for Seattle, Washington at midnight, we have a new moon phase. The moon's in Sagittarius, the ascendant's in Virgo, and the MC's in Gemini, and they're both ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is in Sagittarius.
Yep. It's pretty. So I think it really does, and because we're in Mercury retrograde, I think this really highlights Mercury for the month, definitely, as we'll see, based on a couple of things.
Exactly. And, we could be reviewing some of our belief systems possibly with that Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius.
Oh yeah, and I think as we'll see with the Jupiter Saturn square, and Mercury opposing Jupiter in that, because it's the first square after the Jupiter Saturn conjunction had happened in 2020. This is the first square, first and that, so it's telling us a lot, informing us a lot.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a few planets out of bounds this month. And out of bounds is when the declination exceeds 23 and 27 north or south. The moon is out of bounds from December 1st through the 5th, the 14th through the 18th, the 28th through January 1st. And Venus is out of bounds until December 3rd. And Ceres is out of bounds all month until January 15th of 2025. And when planets are out of bounds, they act on their own because they're out of the bounds of the sun and they act differently. Did you want to comment on that?
No, I think you got it covered.
And then planets ingressing into new signs. Venus on the 6th moves into Aquarius. On the 7th, Ceres moves into Aquarius. And on the 21st, the sun moves into Capricorn for winter solstice.
Yep.
And then we have a few planets stationing retrograde or direct. On December 6th, Mars stations retrograde. On December 7th, Neptune stations direct. And on December 15th, Mercury stations direct.
And I want to point out one thing that we got that on there, that if people are wondering how long Mercury will be retrograde, it's retrograde until February 23rd, 2025.
That's Mars, not Mercury.
I mean Mars. See, I got Mercury on the mind here, but yes, it's Mars. So if anybody's wondering about Mars, thank you.
Oh, no problem. And then here's an aspect key because we talk often about the aspects. And for those of you that want more information, there it is. And then we start out with the Sagittarius new moon. It happened November 30th in the Seattle area, but for the East Coast, it was December 1st. So I thought we'd start with that briefly. And the sun and moon were conjunct in Sagittarius at 9 degrees Scorpio.
Yep.
And then we kind of do about a week at a time. So December 1st through the 6th, we have a T square with Jupiter, Mercury, Sun, and Saturn. And on the 1st, Mercury in Sagittarius is trine Chiron in Aries. And do you want me just to read all these off, or do we want to
Sure. Why
talk
don't
about
you go
each
ahead and
one?
then we can talk about them. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
And then on the 2nd, we have Venus in Capricorn, trine Uranus in Taurus. On the 4th, Mercury in Sagittarius is opposite Jupiter in Gemini. And also on the 4th is Sun in Sagittarius is square Saturn in Pisces. And also Venus in Capricorn is sextile Neptune in Pisces. On the 5th, we have Sun conjunct Mercury in Sagittarius. And on the 6th, we have Mars station retrograde in Leo. And Mercury in Sagittarius squares Saturn in Pisces. And Venus ingresses into Aquarius. And these dates are when these aspects are exact. So they often will have an effect, several days before and after. And if it's the outer planets, can be even longer.
Yeah.
So jump in and talk about some of this if you would like for the
Well,
first week of December.
Yeah, I think the thing that jumps out to me this first week, of course, is the Mars retrograde. Because this will be, of course, Mars retrograde until February. It's a very long period for Mars retrograde in Leo, and it's definitely an evaluation time of what actions we're going to take over the next few months. And I think what we'll see at this point in the month, we'll also have we got the Mars Pluto opposition, which will strengthen that as well. So that to me really is a big thing that jumps out about this chart, this particular first week. What about you?
Well, I kind of like what's jumping at me is that T square, also the Mars gonna station retrograde, but Mercury is conjunct the Sun opposite Jupiter, and then they T square off to Saturn. So Mercury's opposite Jupiter for a while there, but then the Sun joined in the party. So to me, there's always some adjustments that are taking place. So I would say the first week of December, try to be gentle with yourself and others, because sometimes we want to resist making adjustments and changes, but I would say that that we need to make them. It's time to make them.
Right. And I think the other thing, this is what I was talking to in the beginning of the show, is that this Jupiter Saturn's square, if we go back to December 2020, was when I believe was the conjunction for every 20 years, the Jupiter Saturn conjunction. This is the first square of that. So this kind of brings back or harkens back to the beginning of this 20-year period in 2020 and what we were doing around that period of time. And so if we started something right around the end of 2020 during that first Jupiter Saturn square, the first one, of course, in an air sign in years, that this is, looking back on that, it's kind of informing maybe we need to make some changes on anything that we started right around that time.
Exactly. And I believe that this is the second first quarter square, because there was one about a month ago briefly. It was like a day or two, and then this is the third one, second one, and then we'll have a third one again. So but we're in that phase of that square, so it's like you have time to make the adjustments, so it doesn't have to be in a big hurry. But it is an important phase, because what we started the end of 2020 and possibly even the beginning of 2021, because sometimes it's like we can have the idea and we just it takes a while to launch it, so to speak. So
absolutely.
But if you journal or anything, you can reflect back to what you might have been doing then and see, like, what were you doing? I mean, yes, we were in the COVID pandemic, but people were still doing other things too. So you might have been thinking of, launching some new projects or some ideas for the future. And, maybe if you hadn't taken action on, now's a good time that maybe you might want to revisit that and see if like maybe that was maybe a good idea.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. You ready to go on to the next week?
Sure. Let's go to the next week.
So December 7th through the 15th. On the 7th, we have Venus conjunct Pluto in Aquarius. Sun in Sagittarius is exact opposite to Jupiter in Gemini. Neptune stations direct, and Ceres moves into Aquarius. So that's a busy day on the 7th. On the 8th,
Right.
we have Ceres conjunct Pluto in Aquarius. On the 10th, we have Sun in Sagittarius trine Chiron in Aries. On the 12th, we have Venus in Aquarius opposite Mars in Leo. And Mercury in Sagittarius sextile to Venus in Aquarius. And then on the 15th, the Sun in Sagittarius is quincunx Uranus in Taurus. Mercury stations direct that day, and it's a Gemini full moon. Wow, that's a big, busy week, huh?
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. So, what jumps out to you about this particular week? Which one jumps out to you?
Well, we have Neptune stationing direct and Mercury stationing direct. So we have two planets stationing direct. So to me, when planets station direct or retrograde, I always think of like a big energy activation happening, that there's like this a lot of movement, but it takes, like Neptune's going to take some time to get some momentum to move forward. Now Mercury doesn't take as long, but it will still take some time to move forward. So those planets moving forward, that's um, the energy changing and moving.
Right. Right. The thing that jumps out to me is the conjunction with Pluto of Ceres and Venus. This is not an easy point for Venus, being opposite Mars there. So I think this really speaks to a lot about our relationships. And since Ceres is there as well. And so this is it's a time really to just pay attention to how we're interacting with others. I think with that Venus Mars opposition there, and so really it's almost like Pluto's there taking out the carriage of what Venus is running on there. So it could see some changes in our relationships, and just to be aware of how we're interacting with others in that particular period of time.
Well, and it might be a good time to kind of evaluate relationships. It's like, um, does it need fertilizer? Does it need water? Does it, and I'm using as a analogy with plants, but a plant, sometimes needs to be repotted, or it needs a boost of energy with some fertilizer to help it grow. Because are we stagnant in our relationship, or is there something we could do with ourselves or with the other person or the people that we're involved with to make
Right.
it more positive? um, be creative. And Mercury's still retrograde at this point, but at the end of the week we'll be moving forward. So
Yeah.
jot down some things.
And I would say this is a pretty powerful full moon because Jupiter's right next to it. Just expanding that energy of the Gemini full moon. So there's going to be a lot of. It's a great time for creative thinking, for communications of any type during this Gemini full moon. Even though Jupiter's retrograde, still it's still really expanding the moon energy on this one.
Right, and that Uranus is quincunx to the sun, so we could have some surprises. And surprises and changes, because it's about sudden surprise change, can be positive, but they don't have to be positive. But
Right.
sometimes a sudden change or surprise at first can appear to be not such a good thing, but then it can turn out to be a really good thing.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So you ready
You
to go to
ready?
the next week?
Yeah. Well, here's a little bit more of what's going on with that Gemini full moon at 23 degrees of Gemini in 52 minutes. We have a yod pointing to Uranus, and one handle is the sun, and the other handle is Vesta, because the sun and Vesta are sextile to each other, pointing to that Uranus. So it's, yeah, that really kind of enforces that energy with the sun Uranus quincunx. And Vesta, is our hearth and home. So there
Yeah.
could be even changes that we're making. Do we want to move to a different location? Do we have a job that we want to be closer to our job? um, do we want to renovate? Do we want to downsize? Do we want to upsize? Any number of those kind of things.
Yeah.
And then we have a T square here with the nodes to Pallas Athena.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a mystical rectangle. And the players in the mystical rectangle are the nodes and Mars and Ceres, the direct players. But you could also say Pluto and Venus are involved in that too. And mystical rectangles often offer us a gift or a surprise, an opportunity. So pay attention to the opportunities. But in a mystical rectangle, it's two trines, two sextiles, and two oppositions that all connect together. So, there is that opposing forces there too. So,
Right. Well, and it's interesting that they're taking in the nodes and Mars, and I'm going to even say a little bit of Pluto energy there. This is, I think, just a sort of a lead into the Pluto Mars opposition here that change is coming.
yes. And that Mars Pluto opposition is in effect for um, probably another month or so. So,
Yeah, it's quite long.
mhm.
Actually, it goes into the new year, so definitely
Yes.
for a
Okay.
while, actually, because it's there pretty much for a good part of the Mars retrograde period.
Yeah, I think it might even be in effect through January and maybe even part of February.
February, if I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go back to the slides, and now we're on the week from December 16th through the 25th, and we have on the 18th, we have Sun in Sagittarius square Neptune in Pisces. On the 19th, we have Venus in Aquarius trine Jupiter in Gemini. On the 21st, the Sun moves into Capricorn for winter solstice. The 23rd, Venus in Aquarius sextile Chiron in Aries. And on the 24th, we have Jupiter in Gemini, square Saturn in Pisces, and Sun in Capricorn, quincunx Mars in Leo. So what jumps out to
Well,
you?
the thing that jumped out to me about this when we were looking through the slides was the Sun Neptune square, because I think this is really, I think this is, brings a tension. Of course, it's a tension there and a challenge with individuals in the collective, because Neptune being the collective planet and the Sun being individuals. And it's in Capricorn there. So there's definitely going to be a lot of. By the way, this is actually just after the Electoral College in the United States votes. So I think this is really, if in the United States, really kind of represents sort of that tension that's going to be in the collective.
Yes. Well, and since the sun ingresses into Capricorn for the winter solstice, that's starting a new season for the next
Mm-hmm.
3 months. And, you know, what we dream of, since that's square with Neptune, it's like our dreams and our visions. It's like, are we being realistic or are we being unrealistic? We could maybe have a little bit of both. And, maybe it's time to be more realistic
Right.
than pie in the sky, so to speak.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Okay, so you ready to go on to the next one?
Sure.
Okay, then we have December 26th through the 31st. On the 26th, Mercury in Sagittarius is opposite Jupiter in Gemini, and Mercury is square Saturn in Pisces. On the 27th, we have Venus in Aquarius, square Uranus in Taurus. And on the 29th, Chiron stations direct. And
Mm-hmm.
on the 30th, Capricorn, new moon at 9 degrees Capricorn, and Mercury in Sagittarius is trine Chiron in Aries. So
Yeah.
it seems like every week there's quite a bit going on, and planets, moving, changing directions. So it enhances the energy. Anything else kind of stick out on this one?
No. Again, I think it's important. I want to bring back to something we already talked about because you got it on the slide here. Again, the Jupiter Saturn square I think is really important. This being the first first square of 20 of what we saw in December 2020. So or the first, because Jupiter's going retrograde, it's still technically the first season of the first square here.
Mhm.
So I think it's kind of important as to we pay attention to that, because Mercury is really informing us of and I think the opposition with Jupiter is because they are also in mutual reception. There is bringing in new ideas, and of course it's an opposition, so it's an adjustment, and I think that that's a really important part of this whole thing. I think new ideas are really able to come in and for us to make decisions about things, and it's a really good time for coming up with new ideas. And even though Mars is retrograde going into the new year, I think this is still auspicious for setting goals for the new year and overcoming those obstacles or challenges.
Well, and that Mercury will be almost out of its shadow about then. And I think that there's a lot of information coming in that to help make the changes and adjustments. During the retrograde phase of Mercury, it might, been unclear, but it's sometimes things just come to you in the information that you need. It's like, oh, wow,
Right.
that is very helpful. And now I can move forward on that.
Yeah.
So December, it seems like it's kind of busy and a lot going on.
Yeah, sure does. And we end the year on a new moon, so.
I know, that's really
Or new
interesting.
moon. Yes.
Yeah. And we'll be back to talk about that and the Mars retrograde at a later date and the full moon. So, what would you say for some general advice for the month of December for people?
Well, I think just to stay grounded in the first 2 weeks. That's going to be the hardest, I think, part of the month is the first couple of weeks. Mercury's still retrograde, and we move into a Mars retrograde. But I think as we get through the month, it'll start to bring some stability later in the month, I think. But I would just say, just be grounded, take care of yourselves, and just be resilient as we go through this time and regroup, and definitely set some really good goals for the coming year. And yeah, that's what I would say.
Well, yeah, and I agree with that. And get rest, because it feels like December is going to be a busy month to me.
Yeah, I would
Okay,
agree.
and then you have a quote to share with us.
Yeah, so this quote really, I was looking at the Sabian symbols for the particular new moon at the end of the year here. And a part of the Sabian symbols for that Capricorn new moon resolve around letting go of fear and trust, and trusting that things are going to work out okay, and also about understanding the bigger picture of what we're dealing with, because when we move into that Sag energy, right, it's about the bigger picture, right, and the philosophical way to see the world. And so Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust. And so this is a quote by him. He said, "The spiritual journey is the search for meaning beyond the physical world, a connection to something greater than ourselves." And I think at this particular time, when we're going through a lot, where we're seeing a lot of dissolution of our structure, I think this is a time to really step back and to really zone in on what the meaning is for what we're going through. And I thought this was really great, dealing with being persistent, resilient, and looking deeper into the meaning behind everything of what's happening. So,
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I appreciate that.
yeah.
So Justin and I both have newsletters and YouTube channels, and we always enjoy having our people subscribe and sign up. And then other podcasts, Justin and I do 2 or 3 a month, the astrology forecast and the full moon forecast and an Chiron asteroid series. And then I have a show called the Astrology Star Sisters, and we have several different topics and some new shows coming up for the new year. We have the dwarf planets, planet stationing, the decans using astrology and tarot, and the fixed stars. And then Justin and I are on Talk Cosmos, and in the Seattle area, it's on KKNW on December 1st. And for KMET in Palm Springs, it's on December 3rd.
Yeah.
And then do you want to talk about your talk at OPA?
Yeah, I have a talk coming up on December 8th for OPA, Organization of Professional Astrologers, talking about the Sabian symbols, speaking of the Sabian symbols, and how to use them as doing chart interpretation for clients. And so this will be a really great talk.
And members, the talk is free. And if you're not a member, you could become a member, or it's $15 for non-members to sign up.
Yeah.
And then you want to talk about this one too, please?
Yeah, so I'm also on a podcast with Michael Bartlett, who's a great astrologer, also out of New Mexico. And we have a podcast called The Relationship Guys. And so you can find us on YouTube. And it's where we look at synastry of charts and looking at different couples. And so it's a really great informative podcast. So check us out.
I enjoy it. It's good. And then you also do the Mars forecast and some other stuff on Instagram, so people can follow you on Instagram. And again, to get a hold of Justin, it's his website is justincrockettLZ.com, and my website is alightpath.com. And thank you for joining us today, and all those that come along and watch later. We appreciate, and subscribe and like and leave us a comment, and we look forward to seeing you soon. So goodbye for now, and we'll see you soon.